So welcome to the Trinity Postgraduate Open Day. My name is Luke O'Neill and the topic today is teaching and research in a COVID-19 world. And we're going to discuss this at different levels. Now, I am the chair of biochemistry in Trinity. I work on COVID-19 in my lab. We have 4 separate projects running, very interested in the therapeutic side of COVID-19 mainly, some interest in vaccines. I've got several postgrads in my lab, of course, and we're talking about postgraduate issues, I guess, overall today. I've got 7 PhD students. 3 of them are working on COVID-19 projects, to give you an example. And we'll be touching on several topics, and I'm joined by Trinity students Kiara Houts and Jamie Sugru and Dr. Sonam Banka, Research Fellow, who will provide insights into COVID-19 research in Trinity. And then also Professor Mary Lee Rhodes of the Trinity Business School, who will give us an overview on teaching at Trinity in the COVID-19 world. They're the topics that we're going to be touching on in the next period. And I'm not going to introduce each speaker, I've just given you their names, so there's only for you guys to introduce yourselves. But I'm going to start with a question for Mary Lee. Mary Lee, what makes Trinity so special, and why do so many students choose to study here, would you say?
Thanks, Luke. Well, what I will say is that Trinity has been around for a very long time. So it's pretty well known. It was founded in 1492. And students come here for the education, for the experience, for the connectedness between researchers and teachers. And what we find, certainly in the business school, is that students also come here for Dublin. They come, it's a European global city centre. Everything's on your doorstep. It's an extremely safe and friendly city. We've got our triple accredited business school, of course. I had to mention that since we were just awarded that a couple of days ago. It's also the European capital of entrepreneurship. So students who come here get their education, they can, go directly into businesses in Ireland. And in fact, the government has made that fairly simple with a visa that allows students to stay here for another 2 years after their graduation to look for work.
Which is brilliant, isn't it? Yeah. Give us that accreditation thing again, Mary. That was a big achievement, wasn't it? That was a
yeah, yeah, it is something to celebrate. In fact, our dean was deeply disappointed we couldn't all go out together to the pub. But the business school was accredited, its 3rd accreditation from AACSB, which is an American accreditation group. And this puts it in the top 0.6% of business schools in the world. So it's a really very exciting development for us, and something we've been working towards for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
So
it's fantastic. Well, you've got a fantastic building there, haven't you? I love the new building. It opened about 2 years ago or so. I think it was. Yeah, so it's brilliant.
It did.
It's a brilliant facility,
isn't
it, as well?
And if I can, just to say, it was featured today in a course that a program I was attending. It's got green walls inside or outside and on the roof. So it's quite a very advanced climate-friendly building as well.
It looks beautiful, doesn't it? Yeah. Now, moving back to our main topic, though, and obviously we're still in the middle of this pandemic and the vaccine rollout's beginning. I think we're predicting by September we should hopefully have all the adults and everybody over 18, including students, vaccinated is the great hope here. But of course, the big question is how Trinity's managing through the pandemic and how has it been impacting on teaching and research? What's your view of that one?
Well, I was there. I was teaching when we got the first announcement that we would be starting to get online, and it was very much something that was aligned with government policy. And Trinity took steps quite quickly to get everybody in a safe position. As you know yourself, there was a lot of uncertainty about what the virus brought to us, how communicable it was, what the issues were. So Trinity took major steps to ensure everyone's safety. That was the first thing. Students are now able, if they wish, to avail of testing from the health center. And we've put a lot of safety features and social distancing signage all over campus. Our goal is to keep students and staff able to come to campus to the extent they're allowed or necessary. So that would have occurred in the beginning. When people were doing labs, they were still able to come in for labs, again, subject to social distancing and other protocols. In the first term of this year, so we had a summer to prepare. And in the first term of this year, the students were able to come in to the extent that we could plan teaching interactions where they could sit apart. We have very big rooms, very big lecture theaters in the business school and other places in Trinity. And we were able to hold up to 17% of our modules face-to-face. It's our goal. It's a face-to-face university. So we told people we would do as much as we could. We did as much as we could. Students did actually enjoy their teaching, even if it was online. This year, I was pleased to say, being the director of Postgrad in the business school, that our student evaluations over the first term, the average was 4.3 out of 5 for overall satisfaction.
Good.
So everything we did was to keep the education going, but also keep the connections going. So that's another big piece of what we did. We would have cafes, we have open hours, casual cafes. We worked to get the students not only to link with professors, but organize to have networking events with other universities, which was an interesting development that we'd never done before during term. And we're holding coffee mornings with business schools around Europe.
Brilliant, yeah. I mean, no more than myself. I mean, trying to get that blend between online stuff and in person is important, isn't it? And we've had a fair bit of, not a fair, but some person-to-person stuff just to keep that going. Because what strikes me is being in university is a social activity as well, isn't it? The academics is one side of it, but the social bit's probably as important, if not more important. Don't you agree? I mean, and do you think in the business school you managed to crack that? At least you managed to keep both up.
Well, it's hard to crack it online. I mean, it's not the same. There's no saying anything about that. And as you said, I mean, my understanding, you would know much better than I, but my understanding is we are hoping that by September, the majority of people in Ireland will be vaccinated and will be able to go back as much to normal as possible. Yeah. And what I will say is there have been opportunities online that we would not have had in face-to-face. So as I said, the networking events are one thing. Another is the kinds of events that you wouldn't plan. So we had a wine tasting. We had a virtual wine tasting with the MBAs. Run by one of our lecturers. Run by an accounting lecturer, which was an interesting experience. So it is possible to do. And the students have been running things. They've been running online discos. They've been running various and sundry things that we've tried to facilitate to the extent giving them access to premium Zoom, etc. And also organizing where possible when the restrictions allow us to having sort of one-on-one meetings. So you can organize to meet your students in the building, subject to social distancing, etc. If you plan in advance. So, but hopefully all this will not be happening in this coming September.
Yeah, now we managed to do tutorials and various things person to person with the numbers restricted, obviously, and all the usual guidelines in place. Yeah, September's going to be interesting, isn't it? You're hopeful. Now you're asking me, I suppose, but I mean, the hope is there will be a vaccination program. And there could well be vaccine certificates, actually, which will be controversial to some extent, but that will allow everybody back. I think I'm anticipating a lot more person-to-person stuff. As you'd be hoping for that as well, I imagine.
Well, I'm planning for it. That's our plan A. Plan A is back to class. I will say that we've gotten pretty good at managing, and my understanding is Trinity itself has not had a significant number of outbreaks. The students have been fantastic. There haven't been any situations where, we've had, big events that shouldn't have happened. We also, the global relations team, for those students thinking of coming here from, far away, the global relations team have organized an airport meet and greet service. So you're met at the airport, brought to accommodation, organized to get meals brought to you if we still have to quarantine. Clubs and societies have gone online, and all of our student services have upped their online game. So really, if we're still stuck, we're getting better and better at this. So we would still hope to welcome our students back in September, whatever the situation.
That's exactly what we're doing. I mean, we've got a plan for just in case, I suppose. There's other things we can do, but we'll be optimistic. Well, that's the main thing. Thank you very much, Mary Lee. I might move on now to Chiara Houts, who's in linguistics. Hi. Chiara, how are you?
Yeah. Hi, I'm grand. How are you?
So tell us all why you chose Trinity and the course you're doing.
Well, initially, actually, Trinity. So my father and grandfather both went to Trinity. So for me, it was kind of a lifelong ambition, kind of, well, if college, then Trinity. And I'm an English teacher, and it's always kind of been interesting in language and linguistics. So that kind of seemed like a perfect combination. And then also looking into Trinity was kind of even more conviction. I was doubting Glasgow for a second there as well. But just the course is smaller. It's more specific to what I wanted. So it was pretty easy decision for me to make.
Very good, and so far so good, right? In spite of all the various difficulties we're having through COVID.
Yeah, so in spite of everything, I mean, I haven't seen the inside of it. Yeah, so my entire school year has been online.
Yeah,
I've had sadly, we've had no face-to-face anything. But even then, the lecturers and the entire organization managed to do it wonderfully. So it was still pretty good. It's still pretty good.
very good. Yeah, given the circumstances. And what advice would you have for any student considering becoming a postgrad in Trinity?
Well, absolutely do it, because even in this kind of strange situation, the lecturers and the organization have still managed to do it extremely well. What I would say is, with your electives, really research your electives, really do a deep dive there, so that, because you sometimes hear changing electives last minute because it doesn't apparently seem, it's not exactly what you wanted. So really kind of invest in finding out what your electives are. And and I think it also in this weird time is made very clear to keep yourself physically and mentally kind of well, and really kind of invest in, focus on that and make sure that you stay physically well, mentally well. That's important.
Right. I think a good phrase I use is we should cut ourselves a bit more slack, because it's not easy, is it? Let's face it.
Absolutely. And, sometimes you have to kind of accept, I think that what makes it easier is sometimes accepting that it's just not working at the moment. Just have a half a day where you say, okay, not today, and pick it up again. So don't fight it. Just, it's hard for everyone at the moment. So
it is.
Just kind of keep sane.
Yeah. And did the staff or your supervisor or whatever it is, did they cut you some slack? Did they try to make it a bit more easy for you?
Well, look, we're all as accommodating as we can be, yeah. So the contact's always been pretty good. So with all the courses, they're very in contact. You're kept up to date. Yeah. You're kept, you pretty, even though you haven't really ever seen them face to face. It's still a pretty personal connection, and they do kind of know you, because the classes aren't large, so you do feel known even online.
Yeah. That's important, isn't it? And what is the plan after graduation?
Well, I'm an English teacher in the Netherlands, so back to teaching, but also kind of looking at then taking my degree and going higher. So teaching linguistics at a bachelor level, and then potentially maybe a PhD. But that's for a later date. That's a possibility. But certainly back to teaching. Yeah,
is that
absolutely.
the ultimate plan here, to do a PhD? But is that what you'd like to do ultimately, or I guess it
if
depends.
If there's something that would really trigger my passion, if there's like a topic, if I can really find my area, but it's not decided really.
Right, very good. Thank you very much. Thanks, Gareth. That's great. Now we move on. Sonam, are you there? Sonam, you are in the virtual world. I hope. Very good.
Hello.
Now you're a research fellow here in Trinity, working on the prevalence of asymptomatic COVID-19 in Ireland. How relevant is that? Tell us about your research.
Very relevant. At the moment, our team is using a back calculation method to provide an estimate of asymptomatic cases in Ireland. And this model has been used successfully, both nationally and internationally. So, for example, in Ireland, we'd used this in the past to estimate the prevalence of HIV and AIDS, so the hidden estimates of HIV and AIDS. So now we're using this model. We are taking the 7th-day smooth daily incidence of diagnosed cases and working with a known incubation period to provide an estimate of asymptomatic cases. And so far, what we found is a 1-to-1 ratio to symptomatic and asymptomatic cases. So these are very important findings, of course, for the decision makers to be aware of what the scale of asymptomatic cases are in Ireland.
Right. Can you give us a percent? Have you got any numbers already?
Moment,
you must have.
I do have numbers, but I don't have them in front of me, and I wouldn't want to say the wrong one.
No. Well, it's a great question. I think it's about 40–50% overall, is it globally, asymptomatic COVID. Is that right, or is that a bit
Well,
high? What do you think?
we did find a 1-to-1 ratio, so
Yeah, so it must be something like
that's
that. Yeah,
for wave 1, 2, and 3.
yeah. And give us your academic background.
So my academic background is very different to the field I'm currently working in. I'm a psychologist by profession, and I did my PhD in the School of Nursing Midwifery here in Trinity. And my research was on the statistical relationship between depression, obesity, and post-school performance among children.
Right.
But I have since completed further qualifications in statistics, data analytics, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Quite a lot, but quite different. But I found that I've managed to use all of these different fields in my research, which currently I do a bit of work with public health and working with vulnerable communities.
Very good. Yeah, no, it sounds as if you need all those skills by the sounds of things in terms of what you're working on. So that's all. They're all highly relevant by the sounds of things. What about the entrepreneur bit, though? That's a bit different, isn't it?
It is different. So I wanted to, when I was doing my PhD in Trinity, I don't know if many students might be aware of this, but Tangent, Trinity's Ideas Workspace, used to provide PhD training for students to move into the sphere of innovation and entrepreneurship. It was a free course, and I thought I'll try it out and see what it's like. And I found that I used a lot of the innovation skills in developing intervention workshops with children. So it's all helping in my research.
Very good. Yeah. No, I mean, to be honest, in my own lab, we look at entrepreneurship a lot, to be honest. And I've had a couple of companies which postgrads are involved in. Even I think it's another aspect of what we do, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just students don't realize the potential that there is in entrepreneurship until they actually take a course or even a one-day intern training in it.
Yep. And overall, how's Trinity supported you, would you say, during your research during the pandemic? How have you found the support?
I have to say, I think it has been pretty good, given that we're all working from home and setting up home offices and making sure the cat doesn't waltz in halfway through a meeting. It's been very different, but Trinity IT services have just been fantastic. We've been given our laptops, all the technology bits and pieces that we need to do our job. We have an amazing librarian in our school, which has helped the process doing research online. And of course, it has been difficult to get into a routine, but with the various support systems that IT services provide in combination with what HR provides, it has been really good so far.
Yeah, actually, on that from me, I mean, I had to record about 20 lectures, obviously on the Blackboard system, and they helped me. I had a couple of problems with my own desktop and stuff, and I got them all recorded. I was so happy. You're always worried when you start recording a lecture, it's not actually being recorded, so that's the fear.
Yes.
But it all worked out for me with their help. I must say, I was very grateful to them. And I have to ask you this question: any advice for students considering it? What would you say to someone who's considering a PhD, say in Trinity, or joining as a postgrad?
So I've had a very good PhD experience, and it's mostly because I've had an amazing supervisory team. Professor Catherine Komisky is an absolute amazing supervisor to work with, and I would highly recommend to future students to really research potential supervisors really well, make sure that you share similar philosophies and research approach before you decide which one to go for, because it's important to be on the same page. That will make sure that you have a more enjoyable PhD journey, really.
I think you're right. From my own even my own experience when I was a PhD student, you got to make sure you can get on with your supervisor, at least to some extent.
Yes.
You don't need to be best buddies, but it's a very important relationship, isn't it? It's the key relationship, of course, between the PhD supervisor and the student, to make sure that you can work together. Yeah, no, and luckily enough, the one I had, my own supervisor, was great. I'm not sure what my students would say, but but it's a key thing to try to think about, isn't it? Who you sign up to is as important as the subject, almost, isn't it? It's equally important anyway, you might say.
Exactly.
Very good. Thank you very much, Cara. Now we're going to move on to Jamie, my fellow immunologist. How's it going, Jamie?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad. Are you in the building?
Yeah, I'm tucked over on the opposite side of the building, I think, to you.
Good man. You're socially isolating yourself, I hope, and observing all the guidelines. Let me ask you, you work on viral immunology. Tell us about your research.
Yep, so I work on hepatitis C virus infection, specifically with a cohort of women who were exposed to Hep C through a contaminated medication. And we've been asking the question of how are some people protected against hepatitis C? And then more recently, I guess, being a viral immunologist, we've also kind of branched into some COVID work, which has sort of become tacked on to the side of my PhD.
Right. And what aspect of COVID are you looking at?
So similar to what we're looking at in Hep C, so we're looking at sort of the heterogeneity, or why some people seem to be more predisposed to developing severe disease versus mild disease versus being asymptomatic. And so, yeah, so with some clinicians in St. James's Hospital, who we would have worked pretty closely with for my own project, we've been collecting samples from COVID patients who had those sort of different disease severities, and doing some work to see, why is that the case.
Right. Have you been vaccinated?
This morning, I got my first dose this morning.
See, I knew that. I knew the answer to that. Yeah, three of my lab got vaccinated as well, which was a cause for celebration, isn't it, James? It's great. And how's the last 12 months been for you? Because it can't have been that easy, given all the various restrictions and what have you.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's been pretty disruptive. I mean, it has been for everyone. For me specifically, though, I mean, the cohort of women that we work with for my PhD project, I mean, they're women in their 70s. So obviously I can't get any more samples anymore. So that's meant we have had to think of, different ways of asking my research question, or using the samples that we had collected pre-pandemic. I mean, precious samples are now even more precious. So it's been difficult, but I think, as much as every PhD training, there's going to be some sort of hiccup or issue that you need to overcome. And I think, that this is not, on a bigger scale, but it's not that different to, you have to adapt, I guess.
Yeah, no, indeed. That's the essence of it in some ways, isn't it? Because even pre-pandemic, it's tricky enough doing a PhD, isn't it? You got to keep going. And how have you managed to keep yourself motivated?
I mean, it's difficult, especially when you're working in sort of that area of COVID and viral immunology. I mean, your work is entirely COVID, and then the outside world is entirely COVID. So I think it really becomes pretty important to try and take a step back and partition those things. And then also, I mean, I have a really great supervisor who's just sort of bursting with enthusiasm all the time. So she's a great force to keep people motivated. And we still have, weekly lab meetings, and even we've sort of added an additional journal club. So, I mean, all those types of things are really good for keeping the fire lit and making sure everyone's staying on track.
Indeed, they are. They're critical in many ways, aren't they? And what's going to happen? Are you going to finish the PhD? When's your deadline? Let's ask that question.
So I should be finishing in September.
Right.
But I think that the plan currently is to try and finish up over the summer, and then stay in the lab in currently, and as a postdoc. So kind of take on more of the COVID project through the, I guess, yourself, like Trinity's gotten some funding through the COVID hub, and so try join that as a postdoc and continue with the COVID work, but in a more as a primary focus.
Very good. Oh, and I suspect, Jamie, the Dean of Graduate Studies will cut us all a bit of slack with the deadlines, because of all the difficulties we've all had, so maybe a bit less stringent in terms of a submission date. I bet you will happen. And I've got to ask you this question, because it's the burning question. What advice would you give anybody considering a PhD in Trinity?
I mean, I guess I'd echo what Sonam said in that it's really important to do your research about the PIs or professors that you want to work with. I mean, speaking from the sort of biological sciences perspective, I mean, it's really important that if you are interested in a particular person, to reach out to them, have a conversation with them about whether or not they have opportunities in the lab for you, or do research around funding as well, and go to them saying, hey, look, I think this grant could be a cool thing to apply for. So I mean, doing your research is absolutely paramount, but also don't be afraid to reach out to people. Usually they're quite enthusiastic about recruiting students.
Right. And Jamie, during your PhD, what other courses did you do? Was there other stuff you did outside your research course, or your research project? There's a number of things, isn't there, which are available to students?
Yeah, I mean, I did my undergrad here as well, so I've always been pretty involved in student life, and I kind of carried that over into my PhD. So then as well, I mean, doing a PhD here, I mean, Trinity is part of like the sort of League of European Research Universities, which is this really really cool European lobby body that you can that sort of runs summer schools and that kind of thing. So I mean, all those things really really. I mean, by going to Trinity, you have access to all those types of things. So I mean, taken advantage of those opportunities throughout my PhD as well.
Very good. Thank you very much, Jamie. And I want to thank all our participants, and thanks to everybody for listening as well. You got an action-packed day ahead. Make the most of it. It's all about finding out about Trinity and the kind of things available. Talk to people as best you can. Talk to the staff. There's a campus tour planned as well somehow. I'm sure that'll be happening as well. Enjoy the day, and we look forward to welcoming you as a Trinity student in the near future. Cheerio.